Before Earth froze over, the planet was wild, hot, and bursting with strange life. Imagine rhinos the size of trucks, three-toed horses, and giant ferns stretching across open woodlands. Whales still had legs and forests hugged the poles. But around 34 million years ago, something changed. The air grew colder and forests vanished. Nearly 90% of some species vanished too. Plants, mammals, even sea creatures like sea urchins and tiny foraminifera. You might be wondering what massive disaster hit the world. Well, it wasn't a meteor, it was global cooling. This was the end of the Eocene, a turning point when the last iceless Earth began to freeze. Want to see the lost world from the last time our planet was iceless? Let's go. From about 40 to 34 million years ago, Earth was in a time we now call the Late Eocene, or what some call the Iceless Period. And let's just say, if you love warm weather, you would have loved it here. Global temperatures were about 5 to 8 degrees Celsius warmer than today. Even the coldest places we know now were warm and full of life. The air was thick with moisture. Rain fell often, feeding rivers, lakes, and endless green canopies. The skies glowed golden instead of gray. And the forests, they stretched for miles and miles, thicker, greener, and more alive than anything we see today. But don't let the beauty fool you. This warm, lush world was also a place of fierce battles. Giant beasts roamed land and sea, always ready to fight, hunt, or survive. On land, the towering Androsarchus, believed to be the largest meat-eating land mammal ever, stalked its prey across open ground. In the oceans, long snake-like whales called Basilosaurus clashed with each other and ripped into smaller whales and fish with massive toothy jaws. Down in the rivers, crocodiles the size of small buses lay in wait, launching surprise attacks on anything that came near. It was a beautiful world, but also brutal. And as Earth slowly began to cool, the tension in nature only grew stronger. Now picture this. You're walking through a forest in Antarctica. Yes, Antarctica. Today it's a frozen desert, the coldest place on Earth. But back then, it looked more like a tropical rainforest. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze. Giant ferns unfurled across the forest floor. Hills were covered in beech trees, conifers, and even ancient relatives of macadamia and baobab trees, all growing near the South Pole. And it wasn't just Antarctica. Up in Alaska, swamp cypress and tall redwoods covered the land. The Arctic, now a frozen ocean, was once lined with temperate forests that stretched all the way to the sea. Even the places we now think of as icy and lifeless were once buzzing, roaring, and blooming with life. How could this be possible? Where was the ice? Well, here's where things get extra strange. Because there were no huge ice sheets sitting at the poles, all that water had to go somewhere. So it flowed into the oceans and sea levels rose. In fact, oceans were about 70 meters, 230 feet, higher than they are today. Let's pause for a second. Think of your favorite beach. Now imagine that beach is completely underwater, and the sand was gone. Even cities like Miami, Venice, and Amsterdam would be deep beneath the waves. And it wasn't just a little splash here and there. The rising sea levels swallowed entire coastlines, changing the shape of continents. Much of Florida was completely underwater, and large parts of Europe's lowlands vanished beneath the waves. And the shocking thing is that scientists say that during this time, the middle of the United States might have been a shallow sea. So if you were walking across what's now Kansas, you might have found yourself surrounded by waves, seashells, and maybe even a few early whales. Well, it's hard to believe, but Antarctica wasn't the land of ice and penguins it is today. Back then, it was green, wet, and full of life. On Seymour Island, just off the coast of the Antarctic Peninsula, scientists found fossils of flowers, wood, leaves, and even giant penguins that waddled through leafy forests instead of sliding across ice. Those penguins, bigger than a human, some stood as tall as a grown-up. Now imagine one peeking out from behind a tree while parrots squawk in the branches above, and you'd never need a coat. not even in the middle of the Antarctic winter. Temperatures during the coldest months were about 9 degrees Celsius, 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Summers reached 17 degrees Celsius or more. That's warmer than today's spring in many places. And the water? Still warm enough for shellfish, fish, and sea mammals to swim happily near the coast. So what was causing all this heat? One big reason: carbon dioxide. The air had a lot more of it back then, about 750 to 1,000 parts per million, which is more than double what we have today. Carbon dioxide acts like a big blanket around the Earth, keeping heat in. And the thicker that blanket is, the toastier things get. But there was more to the story than just CO2. Antarctica and Australia were still connected at the start of this warm period. That connection helped spread warm water across the southern hemisphere. But during the late Eocene, that connection had already started to weaken. So if they were still partly joined, what caused the dramatic cooling at the end of this period? But wait, this mystery is about to unravel right before your eyes. Just give it a few minutes. However, one of the most amazing things about the late Eocene is just how far forests reached. Trees didn't stop at Canada. They didn't even stop at the Arctic Circle. Fossils of ancient trees have been found on Ellesmere Island in the far north, nearly at the top of the world. And get this, some of those tree remains weren't even fossils. They were actual pieces of wood, perfectly preserved in swampy water, never having the chance to rot. Trees like dawn redwoods and swamp cypress grew tall and thick, right where today we'd need a thick jacket and snow boots. What kinds of animals might have wandered beneath those leafy canopies? What did the sky look like through the towering palms and redwoods? And yes, could parrots and penguins really have shared the same forest? These are questions worth exploring, and the answers might surprise you. We'll uncover these secrets very soon. But before we go into the next chapter of this ancient world, now's the perfect moment to like and subscribe so you won't miss a single step on this incredible journey through Earth's hidden past. Now that we've gotten a glimpse, even this paradise had its secrets. Some clues suggest that cooling had already begun by the end of the late Eocene. Certain leaf fossils show they were getting smaller, something that often happens when plants try to survive cooler, drier weather. Fossils also show a sudden drop in warm-loving sea life and a rise in creatures that like the cold. It was like Earth had caught a chill, but only just a little one. And do you know what? Scientists found ice-rafted debris, chunks of rock that only glaciers can carry, inside some Eocene-age layers in Antarctica. Does that mean ice had already started forming? Maybe, just maybe. But it wasn't the kind of ice we see today. If there was any, it was small and tucked away, high in the mountains, more like valley glaciers than great ice sheets. But then something was shifting, and it all began with a slow-motion breakup. Far down south, two massive land masses, Antarctica and Australia, had been stuck together like best friends. They shared warm oceans and happy forests. Their coastlines kissed the same seas. But deep below them, the Earth was moving. Tectonic plates, the giant puzzle pieces under our feet, were shifting. Slowly, over millions of years, they started to pull apart. Have you ever watched two puzzle pieces being pulled away after staying stuck together for too long? Something changes instantly, right? Well, when Antarctica finally drifted away from Australia, it left behind more than just an empty space. It created a giant watery circle around itself. And this, my curious explorer, was no ordinary ocean current. It was the beginning of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. It's the only current on Earth that flows all the way around the planet without hitting any land. It spun like a cold ribbon around Antarctica, sealing it off from the warmer waters of the rest of the globe. Well, some facts can truly blow your mind, like this one. The swirling current that formed around Antarctica was strong enough to trap the entire continent in its own icy bubble. And guess what? That current still exists today. Yes, you heard that right. With the warm water blocked out, the temperature in Antarctica dropped really fast. Glaciers began to spread. And then, for the first time in Earth's long history, the first permanent ice sheet was born. Consequently, that cold current didn't just change Antarctica. It changed everything. The oceans began to cool. That meant less moisture in the air. Rainforests started drying out. Animals that loved warmth began to disappear. All around the planet, plants and creatures had to scramble to survive. Some made it, many didn't. And under the sea, even more changes were brewing. Scientists later discovered something strange in deep-sea sediments, layers filled with tiny glassy spheres. What were they? Turns out they came from giant space rocks that crashed into Earth. You might be hearing this for the first time, but it actually happened millions of years ago. One of them landed in what is now Russia. Another slammed into the coast of North America. These crashes kicked dust and rock into the sky, blocking out the sun and cooling the Earth even more. Can you believe it? A drifting continent and falling space rocks all at once pushed our warm planet toward a deep freeze. As a result, the temperature dropped by about 2 degrees Celsius during this time. That might sound small, but on a planet-wide scale, it's massive. It's the kind of drop that can change forests into deserts and oceans into ice. Then the Ice Age had officially begun. By 34 million years ago, Earth had fully stepped into a brand new chapter. We call it the Cenozoic Ice Age. It's the one we're still in today. Back then, the East Antarctic ice sheet had already started forming. And over the next few million years, it kept growing, stretching out like a frozen giant. Even Greenland and the North Pole eventually joined in. But in these early days, it was just Antarctica, alone and frozen, spinning inside its cold ocean loop, while the rest of the planet watched in awe. What did it look like? Were there still trees? Did anything survive the sudden chill? And how did life adapt to this frosty new world? Let's start underwater. The warm oceans of the Late Eocene were packed with creatures, not just big, but enormous. Picture this, a whale the size of a school bus, with jaws strong enough to crush bones. I'm talking about Basilosaurus, the terror of the sea. Though its name sounds like a dinosaur, it was actually one of the first true whales. And it wasn't just any whale, it was a hunter. Basilosaurus was so fierce that it gobbled up smaller whales, slicing through the water with its long, serpent-like body. Not only this, some scientists believe Basilosaurus might have even eaten sharks. Now imagine that. A whale is eating a shark in a sea with no ice anywhere. That's how wild the Eocene oceans were. But Basilosaurus wasn't alone. Another sea monster called Odus auriculatus, a kind of ancient shark, swam those same waters. Think of it like the great-great-grandparent of the megalodon. This shark could reach up to 31 feet long. That's longer than a city bus. It had sharp, serrated teeth perfect for biting into whales and giant fish. And just when you think that's huge, scientists have found fossils of Odus obliquus, another early shark that may have reached 39 feet. That's even bigger than auriculatus. These sharks weren't just swimming, they were ruling. Moreover, there was also a snake in the ocean. But not just any snake. This one was the size of a submarine. It was called Palaeophis, and it could grow over 40 feet long. That's right, a sea snake longer than a giraffe is tall. Some believe it could even swallow small whales whole. How did these giants live in warm oceans that today are covered in ice? Because back then, oceans like the Tethys Sea, which no longer exists, were warm, shallow, and filled with life. Other whales like Tethosaurus and Dorudon also swam here, but they had to be careful. One wrong move, and they'd be lunch for Basilosaurus. But the wildlife wasn't just in the sea. On land, strange and fearsome creatures marched through dense forests and muddy riverbanks. In South America, a giant crocodile relative called Barinasuchus lurked in the tall grass. It didn't swim in rivers. It chased its prey across land, standing on all fours like a dinosaur. It belonged to a family called Cebacidae, and some could grow nearly 33 feet long. That's longer than 3 cars lined up. Can you imagine being chased by something like that? And then came the terror birds. Yes, that's their real name, Paraceratherium. These were flightless birds with razor-sharp beaks and long, powerful legs. Some stood taller than a grown man, and they could sprint across open ground. Their beaks were shaped like meat hooks, perfect for hunting. Even without flight, they were at the top of their food chain. But there was more. North America had its own monsters too. Even there was a creature shaped like a pig, but way, way bigger, with a huge head and teeth strong enough to crack bones. That was the entelodon, sometimes called the hell pig. They weren't actually pigs, but something stranger. They roamed in herds, ruled the plains, and probably didn't fear much. Another strange predator was the nimravid. It looked like a saber-toothed cat, but wasn't quite a cat at all. It had large fangs, sharp claws, and powerful muscles. Some nimravids hunted in forests, others chased prey in grassy clearings. They were fierce and clever, and they ruled for a long time. But even the strongest hunters couldn't stop what was coming. As the planet cooled, the forest began to fade. Rainforests once stretched far into the poles. There were palm trees in Alaska and dawn redwoods all the way in the Arctic. Some places like Antarctica even had rainforests around their edges. Imagine trees growing where there's now only ice. But slowly those lush jungles dried out. Deciduous trees, those that dropped their leaves, began to replace evergreen ones. Grasses started to grow in big open patches. Animals had to move, adapt, or disappear. And that's exactly what many of them did. While whales like Basilosaurus and snakes like Palaeophis faded from the seas, new mammals started to rise. While terror birds and hell pigs watched their forests thin, other animals crept in, quieter, faster, and ready for change. Some creatures like the Paraceratherium, a land giant and cousin of the rhino, tried to follow the food. It walked across deserts and dry woodlands, searching for leafy trees. It grew to be the largest land mammal ever, as tall as a giraffe and longer than a bus. But even it couldn't last forever. Even as grasslands grew, some places stayed warm. The oceans were full of life. Forests were noisy, and deep underwater, hidden battles took place. You might think giant dinosaurs were the only ones to fight great wars. But wait until you hear what the whales were up to. Some of them weren't just swimming, they were hunting their own kind. There once was a place long ago called Wadi al-Hitan, now just a dry desert in Egypt. But back in the Eocene, it was covered by a warm sea. Here, two kinds of whales lived side by side. Basilosaurus, the long ruler of the oceans, as I mentioned before, and Dorodon, a smaller, quicker cousin. At first, scientists thought Basilosaurus hunted only fish. But then they found something shocking. Inside the belly of a Basilosaurus fossil, they found bones, unfortunately. Bones of baby Dorodon whales. Not just one, at least two, with bite marks on their skulls. Those marks matched Basilosaurus' teeth exactly. Turns out, Wadi al-Hitan was a nursery, a safe place where Dorodon moms gave birth. And Basilosaurus? It turned that nursery into its feeding ground. Just like modern orcas go after newborn humpbacks, Basilosaurus hunted baby Dorodon with clever head strikes. Can you imagine that? A 50-foot-long sea monster sneaking up on whale babies while their mothers looked on in horror? But Basilosaurus wasn't the only one with a big appetite. Across the ancient oceans, giant Odus sharks swam, huge cousins of today's great whites. Some of them reached over 30 feet long, and they were fast. Fast enough to hunt whales, especially the younger ones. Think about it, hungry sharks, hunting in packs, closing in on lone whales out at sea. And if the whales didn't see them coming, they'd be gone in one bite. It was the age of mammal versus fish, predator versus predator. But that's not even the scariest part, because under those same waters, a slithering shadow moved, long, smooth, and deadly. Its name, Palaeophis colosseus. This snake was no ordinary serpent. It was longer than a school bus, over 40 feet from nose to tail. Scientists believe it hid in the warm shallows of the Tethys Sea, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, in one strike, it could wrap itself around a whale and drag it down. Well, a small one at least. The whales back then were smaller than the giants we know today. That gave the snake the perfect chance to ambush them. While no one's found a whale inside a Palaeophis belly yet, the size match and the snake's power make it very, very possible. So this was no peaceful paradise. It was a battlefield. But the war wasn't only underwater. On land, the fighting looked different, but just as fierce. Beyond this, the forests were home to terrifying land hunters. Like the nimravid, a sharp-toothed, cat-like predator, with saber fangs and fast legs. It didn't chase its prey, it sprang from shadows. But it had competition. In addition, sebasids, crocodile cousins with legs built for running. These weren't swamp dwellers. These reptiles charged on land, snapping their jaws like scissors. One of the biggest, Barinasuchus, was as long as a delivery truck and just as powerful. Can you guess who won when the Nimravid crossed paths with a sebasid? Sometimes the mammals struck first, fast, quiet, deadly. Other times the reptiles surprised them with pure strength. One leaped, the other was crushed. It was a war of muscle, teeth, and strategy. And then came the hell pigs. These massive, bone-crunching beasts weren't pigs at all, but they looked like them. They used their jaws to smash and bite, and their size to scare. Just imagine a field where a Nimravid stalks from the trees, a sebasid crashes through the ferns, and a hell pig snorts in the clearing, all fighting for the same prey, or even each other. These were the last days when reptiles and mammals still fought as equals. For millions of years, dinosaurs had ruled, but now mammals were rising, faster, smarter, and more adaptable. Still, for this short window of time, neither side had won yet. One side had speed and fur, the other had scales and bone-breaking jaws. Each side pushed the other to get better. But what tipped the balance? What moment broke the tie and sent reptiles crawling back to the shadows, while mammals stepped into the spotlight? Some say it was climate change. Others point to shifting continents or new predators. Maybe it was all of them, or something we haven't discovered yet. Well, there are many theories about this, and many mysteries might still come to light. And now the world keeps changing. Even after mammals took the lead, the story isn't over. In fact, we might be going back in time, but not in a time machine. Humans are changing Earth's climate by burning fuels that release gases into the air. These gases trap heat, just like a blanket. Scientists say that by the year 2030, our planet might feel like it did over 3 million years ago. And by 2050, it could feel like the Eocene, hot, swampy, and ice-free, just like 50 million years ago. As we discussed earlier, forests once grew near the North Pole, and tiny horses grazed beside warm lakes. It was a world full of strange creatures and no ice at all. Today, we're heating up the planet so fast that it's hard for animals, plants, and even people to keep up. But here's what we learned from the Eocene. Earth can change, fast and big. The question is, can we? Scientists say we still have time to make better choices. We can use clean energy, plant more trees, and take care of our home. The Eocene teaches us what could happen. The future is a story we're writing now. And this time, we are the ones who tip the balance. Or maybe we've already tipped it. Like what you learned. Tap like, hit subscribe, and tell us your thoughts in the comments below.